Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page, and it is Wednesday morning, February 8th, 2023. Hope everybody's doing all right today. Let's see who we've got with us this morning so far. Sheila, Diana, Anna, Lyle, Janie, Gail. Good to see all of you guys. Hope you're doing all right. Cross-posted onto the nearchurches.com Facebook page. If you have any questions or comments on either one of our pages, use the comment section, and I'll address it when I see it. We're looking at the life of David, and we are ready for 2 Samuel chapter 4 today. I don't know if you can hear it in the background or not, but it's raining a pretty good bit here in Mammoth. I can hear it through my headphones, but I'm supposed to get a lot of rain today. 2 Samuel chapter 4. There's a lot that has happened already in the life of David. He really comes onto the scene in 1 Samuel chapter 16, and he's selected to be the next king of Israel after Saul. And of course, everything we've talked about with, hey Norma, good to see you, with Saul, and now Saul's dead. There has, as we started noticing yesterday, there is the throne doesn't change overnight. Okay, Saul's been king for 40 years. He dies. Well, his son, as you start reading in 2 Samuel chapters 2 and 3, a son assumes the throne, you might say. Ishbosheth, he reigns for 2 years. You get to chapter 3, Ishbosheth, that's a hard name to say. He is murdered. And all of this time, throughout all of this time, the kingdom is, you might say, solidifying under David. And we're going to further notice that today with some events that we're going to pay attention to. But we are, like I said, we're in 2 Samuel chapter 4, and that's part of what this chapter covers is the murder of Saul's son Ishbosheth, who essentially was proclaimed king of Israel after Saul's death. Again, so one of the things I mentioned yesterday is I was trying to think of the way to put it, and I remembered the saying after the video, palace intrigue. There's a lot of palace intrigue that's going on during the transitional time from Saul to the kingdom being established under David. Chapter 4 is part of that. Chapter 5 is part of that. You look at the end, well, for instance, here, the very end of 2 Samuel chapter 4. Let's see here. Saul's son was murdered in his own house, by the way, in his own bed. And David, the men who did that thought that they were doing a favor for King David. And we've already discussed David's mentality, particularly with Saul. He wouldn't take vengeance on Saul himself. He's the Lord's anointed. He'd let God handle that. Well, these guys thought that they were doing David a favor. And, well, 2 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 12, David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. But he took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron. And remember, Abner was the commander of Saul's army, who eventually, after Saul's death, he saw the way things were going, and he made peace with David. Joab then murdered him, and essentially Joab murdered Abner out of revenge because Abner murdered Joab's brother. So there are a lot of connections here, a lot of things to follow. Well, now Ishbosheth is dead, Abner's dead. The kingdom of Saul, the remnants of the kingdom of Saul, it's kind of falling apart. Now Saul does have another son, or rather a grandson. Jonathan, Saul's son, has a son by the name of Mephibosheth, and we're going to read about him a little bit later, particularly in 2 Samuel chapter 9, but David makes some promises, again showing his integrity toward Saul and in particular toward Jonathan, but that comes a little bit later. So he's already been anointed king of Israel, or rather king of Judah after Saul's death, but now we've got to solidify the whole kingdom, because there was that division between the house of David. Where did we read that? We read that yesterday. There was a division and war for a long time between the houses of David and Saul. And was thinking it was back in 2 Samuel chapters 2 and 3. Pages were sticking together. Yeah, 2 Samuel 3 and verse 1. Now there was long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger, the house of Saul grew weaker. So all of that's still going on. But you get here now to 2 Samuel chapter 5, and things really start to solidify, let's say, under the kingship of David. So here's a couple of things that are important to note. 2 Samuel 5 and verse 4, David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. We've already covered that very briefly, but there's not a lot of detail there. And in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. So there, and you even see in the biblical text here that distinction, if you will, between the northern tribes, 10 tribes, Israel, and the southern tribe of Judah, which would also that region of Palestine also included the tribe of Benjamin. But this is how they're identified throughout the Old Testament: Israel and Judah. Well, David is now being identified as the king of them both, and he reigns for a total of 40 years. Good morning, Connie, and good morning, Brian. Good to see you guys. Jerusalem is conquered. This becomes the capital of David's, what would you say? David's kingdom. And of course, Jerusalem ultimately becomes the ultimate place, or the place of sacrifice and worship, the Levitical priesthood, and all of that. But we're not going back into all of that. But David conquers the city of Jerusalem. You get down to verse 7 here. David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. So a lot of times you read through your Old Testament and you read about Zion, even in some prophecies in regard to the establishment of the church. The word of the Lord shall go forth from Zion, Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 and 3 says. Well, that's another term for the city of Jerusalem. It was like a high point in the city. Well, that becomes the central location for his kingdom, let's say. So 2 Samuel chapter 5 covers that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time there. Talks about him defeating the Philistines. Again, they've been a long-time enemy of the Israelites. Well, beginning in 2 Samuel 5:17, you have the record of him taking them down, essentially. Then you get to 2 Samuel chapter 6, and we might spend some time here today. And really, and I told you this yesterday, that I was going to start pointing these out. Really, when you get to 2 Samuel chapter 5 and the account of the kingdom being solidified under David, is really the point where you have the parallels from the books of Samuel and Kings into the book of Chronicles. So, for instance, in 2 Samuel chapter 5, if you want to read the parallel account to what you read in 2 Samuel 5, go over and read 1 Chronicles chapter 11. And it's very close. There are a few minor differences. We'll note some differences today as we go through, particularly here, 2 Samuel chapter 6. But remember, the books of Samuel and Kings, I told you this yesterday, cover both the northern and southern tribes of Israel. Both monarchies, all the kings of Israel, all the kings of Judah. The books of Chronicles, once you get past 1 Chronicles 10, you get to 1 Chronicles 11, you have David dies, then you've got Solomon. But after that, the books of Chronicles cover solely the southern tribe and all the kings and the events and things like that. So I'll kind of point these out as we go through these parallels. But anyway, 2 Samuel chapter 6, the ark, as you see here, the Ark of the Covenant. We've not read about that lately, and if you've reading through your Bible in order, you've not read about the Ark of the Covenant since back in the book of 1 Samuel. Back in 1 Samuel chapters 4 and 5, you read about it. The Ark of the Covenant was stolen by the Philistines. The Israelites were in battle, losing, and they thought, hey, the solution is let's go get the Ark of the Covenant, and then we'll win the fight. Well, they were defeated. The Ark was captured by the Philistines. The Philistines had it for about 7 months. You get to 1 Samuel chapter 7. The Ark is then returned to a place called Kirjath Jearim, and that's where it stayed until this point in time. So for anywhere for about 50 to 60 years, the Ark of the Covenant has not been in Jerusalem ever since it was stolen by the Philistines. David's going to bring it back. And some interesting events take place here. Again, so if you want to read the parallel of 2 Samuel chapter 6, read 1 Chronicles chapters 13 through 16. Obviously, it's a bit longer, but there are more details given there. We're going to stay right here in 2 Samuel chapter 6. Let me see here. Sheila asked, if David took power at 30 and reigned 40 years, did he die at 70 years old? That's a good question, Sheila. Let me do this real quick. 1 Kings chapter 2. David is instructing Solomon here. And just to quickly answer your question, I don't know off the top of my head, Sheila, about an age, but it's when you get to 1 Kings, he's about to die. And he's instructing Solomon. Okay, First Kings chapter 2 and verse 10. So David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The period that David reigned over Israel was 40 years, 7 years, 33 years, etc. So we're not told anything there about the age of David. And I don't know about another passage. Let me look here real quick. Over 1 Kings chapter 2. Verse 10. I don't know, Sheila. I'll just have to say off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question. But if anybody else knows, whether there's an age given or not, you can share that with us. So let me get back here to, where were we? 2 Samuel chapter 6, the Ark of the Covenant brought to Jerusalem. Again, there are more details given in 1 Chronicles 13 through 16. We'll go there in just a minute. If you are familiar with your books of the law, okay, basically Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers is a lot of history about the wilderness wanderings and things like this. So basically the last part of Exodus, basically Exodus 21 through 40, all of the book of Leviticus, you read about the tabernacle, the sacrifices, the furnishings of the tabernacle, the functions of the priesthood, and all of this. God was very specific in the building of the tabernacle, but also in the who's to handle what part. All the Levites, or all those who served, were Levites. Not every Levite was a priest, but anyway. There were specific groups of people that were to handle, for instance here, the Ark of God, as it's mentioned here in 2 Samuel 6 and verse 4. And that was a group of people called the Kohathites, okay? Descendants of Aaron. They were charged, one thing that they were charged with was with the handling of the Ark of the Covenant. So, I'll just show you this real quick. Numbers, that's the wrong chapter. Numbers chapter 3, you've got the sons of Aaron, okay? You've got then the Levites, and then the different responsibilities. You have a census, you have the numbering. Notice here, Numbers chapter 3, verse 17. These are the sons of Levi by their names, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Now the Kohathites, the descendants of Levi, the descendants of his son Kohath, were those who were in charge of handling one thing, was the Ark of the Covenant. So back here to 2 Samuel chapter 6, David is solidifying the kingdom under himself, and they're going to return the Ark to Jerusalem. Like I said, it's been 50 to 60 years since it's been there. How do they do it? Well, they set the Ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. Okay, so again, I'll tell you what I'm going to do here real quick. I'm going to flip over to 1 Chronicles chapter 13, because there are some interesting things here in regard to what happens. Now, I'm assuming that most of you who are on here, you're good Bible students, you know what happens ultimately to Uzzah. But you get over to, I tell you what, I'll just go ahead and flip it over here on the screen too, so you can see. You get over to 1 Chronicles chapter 13. I see here again the Ark of the Covenant brought from Kirjath Jearim. You have the same thing being told to us, that they're going to bring the cart in a certain way, or rather bring the ark on a cart in a certain way. It's going to be brought by ox. Okay, 1 Chronicles 13:9. When they came to Kedon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to hold the ark, for the oxen stumbled. When you go back to Exodus 25, you learn how the ark itself was built. Okay, it's this square box, and on each corner of this box, I guess that's an okay word to use, there was to be a ring, and then there were poles, and the poles were to be put through those rings, and the ark was to be carried on the shoulders of the Kohathites. Again, very specific instructions. And they don't do that. Okay, they don't follow the instructions here. And I was trying to find a verse. I've got these verses underlined in my Bible, but I'm kind of doing it on the fly here. David didn't consult with the Lord about how to do this. He just took it upon himself, again, in an effort to solidify himself as king, solidify the throne under him. And well, there are consequences for not doing things the way God says do. You get down to 1 Chronicles chapter 13. We just looked at verse 9. Verse 10, then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and he struck him because he put his hand to the ark, and he died before God. Okay? We get into this discussion about intent. Uzzah's intentions were good. Who wants the Ark of the Covenant? Okay, this is the mercy seat, the cherubims. This is where God meets the high priest. So who in the world would want this thing to fall to the ground? Well, nobody in their right mind would want to see that happen. And so David sees this, and he says, well, how can I bring the Ark of God? If it's going to be this difficult, what do we do with it? So he wouldn't move the ark with him into the city of David, but took it aside and left it in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite, and it stayed there for 3 months, and the Lord blessed them. Okay, so let me get back here to where we were in 2 Samuel chapter 6. Again, you have the same account here. David was afraid of the Lord that day. 2 Samuel 6 and verse 9 says, how can I do this? Well, I tell you the way you do it is you do it after the prescribed manner. God was very specific on how the ark was to be handled and by whom the ark was to be handled. And they didn't consult the Lord. And again, there's a verse, and I cannot think of where it is. Maybe one of you can find it for me, that says that David didn't do this according to the prescribed manner. Which tells me when God prescribes something, that you have to do it that way. You know, so many folks are so free with their, I would use the language like religious experience, that the biblical text comes secondary. You know, a lot of times people's actions are driven more by what they feel. Kind of like King Saul with his sacrifice in 1 Samuel 13. I felt compelled to do this. And that's the way a lot of people treat religion and their, let's call it religious experience as well. You know, I felt this was the right thing to do. I feel this is okay, that God knows my heart. I don't doubt that God knew Uzzah's heart, and that Uzzah didn't want the Ark of the Covenant to fall to the ground. All right? Well, God still, 2 Samuel 6 and verse 7, he still got angry with Uzzah. But here's the question. Why was he angry with Uzzah? Well, obviously, Uzzah touched the ark, and he was not authorized to do so. But I would say the anger of the Lord was deeper than that, because nobody sought God's will on this. It's David, I guess you could use the word presumptuous, David being presumptuous in accomplishing this task, doing it the way he wanted to do it, whatever his intentions are, regardless. He wanted to do this. And there are consequences to not doing things the way God said would do. God commands do them. Now, of course, the question, we're in the Old Testament. Well, what about the New Testament? I mean, the New Testament's grace and kindness and love and Jesus, and surely the God of the New Testament, what he requires in the New Testament is different. Well, it may be a different law, but it's the same God. Okay? I am the Lord. I do not change, the Bible tells us. While there are different laws throughout Scripture, different covenants, there is the same God. And you don't get to serve God, and this has never been the case, that an individual or individuals get to serve God based on their own presumptive will. I'm going to presume to serve God in this way. And to me, there's so many examples of that. Okay, Cain and Abel. Abel offered by faith a more excellent sacrifice. Cain presumed, that's the only conclusion I can come to, he presumed that God would be happy with what he offered. But if one offered by faith, that implies that something had been revealed in the past, okay? We could go to Nadab and Abihu. They offered strange fire, which the Lord had commanded them, which the Lord had not commanded them. Uzzah, God has never permitted man to approach him on man's own terms. God has always revealed to man what he expects of him, let's say in terms specifically here of worship. Okay, the Ark of the Covenant, that's part of the tabernacle, sacrifice, that's part of their worship. God has always been specific in that realm. Different laws, yes, same God. And his desire for man to follow his will has never changed. Okay? See, a couple of comments have come through here. Let me scroll back up and find those real quickly. I know God made instructions, and I know that God has to keep his promises of commandments, but it seems so unfair that Uzzah would die trying to keep it. Yeah, well, that's kind of the thing, and maybe I'm missing something else here. Not only was David afraid, wasn't he also angry about the situation? Yes, he was. Sheila says, I've thought that too, in terms of what Diana said about doesn't this whole thing seem unjust? Because again, Uzzah just wants to prevent the Ark of the Covenant from falling. I've thought that too, because to try to catch it would be a reflex action, not having time to think. Yeah, and I don't think I'm commenting, at least I'm not intending to comment on what I would consider to be the spiritual condition of Uzzah. I'm not asking the question or even trying to answer, did Uzzah go to heaven or hell? I can't answer that question. The fact of the matter is this: he was not authorized to touch it. Period. But see, that's kind of what I was saying. So here in verse 7, the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah. Well, if David had sought the prescribed manner of handling the ark, there would have been no reason for God to be angry at Uzzah. So it goes deeper than just Uzzah, even with a reflex action, touching the ark. Okay? So there's no argument there for me that it was a reflex and all that, but I believe more than anything what happened to Uzzah is a warning to us that we must do as God says in all things. And I think ultimately, we always point to these verses in the New Testament, whatever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. Romans 15:4, 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 11. The things that happened to Israel happened to them for examples to us. We've got to learn something from what happened here. Uzzah touched something he wasn't supposed to touch. But it goes deeper than that. David didn't consult the Lord. Let me see. I tell you what, give me just a second here. I'm going to see if I can do a search. And there's this passage. Well, give me just a second. Y'all keep discussing. I see comments are still coming up here. I don't know. Maybe I was thinking of another verse. The word prescribed is used several times in the Old Testament, but that's not one of the texts or contexts in which it is used. These Bible apps are so handy. Let's see here. 2 Samuel. I don't know. Somebody else find it. I got to keep going here. David didn't seek the Lord. In regard to Uzzah. Anyway, this example also makes it seem impossible to please God. Uzzah had a reflex action that is a natural human instinct. I know we can go to heaven, but it just seems so hard. Again, it's the same God, but think about it this way, Diana. If they had sought God's word on this, it wouldn't have been hard, because God was very specific. It was a consequence of David's actions without consulting God first. That's exactly what it is. And so you might say, so David got angry, David was afraid, and he put the ark somewhere else for a few months to give it some time. Had he done it right in the first place, this wouldn't even be in the biblical text. This wouldn't be an issue. I think one of the things it teaches us, aside from the specificity of God's desires for man's worship, is that God doesn't leave his people in the dark. And that God doesn't expect his people to do the impossible. So, I tell you what, let me show you this real quick. We'll kind of end with this thought here. Because there are a lot of folks who do sincerely believe, I would say, that, it's just too hard to be a Christian. I can't do it. There's not enough, what would you say, leeway. I'm going to mess up. I'm not perfect. I want you to think about something here for just a minute. And this actually comes from the Old Testament. I'm going to the New Testament passage. But in Romans chapter 10, Paul's talking about living by faith. And how do you become righteous? Listen to this, Romans 10:6. But the righteousness of faith speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who shall ascend into heaven, that is, to bring Christ down from above, or who shall descend into the abyss, that is, to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? What does the law say? What is required of a man to be pleasing in God's eyes? Listen to this. The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith which we preach. Now, all of this is a quote from the Old Covenant, as you see there, Deuteronomy chapter 30. All right? Now, this is in the context of the New Testament, and Paul explaining justification by faith for both Jews and Gentiles. And his point is, it's not impossible. You don't have to do some miraculous act. You don't have to go up to heaven or go down to the grave to figure it all out. Now, when you think in regard to the specificity of the Old Testament, I'm going to go back now to Deuteronomy 30, where this was originally written, where God is laying out the law through Moses. Listen to this. Deuteronomy 30, verse 11. For this commandment which I command you today is not too mysterious for you, nor is it far off. It is not in heaven, that you should say, who shall ascend into heaven for us and bring it to us that we may hear it and do it? Well, that's the point. God came down to the mountain so they could hear it and do it. Nor is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us that we may hear it and do it? They didn't have to. God came to them and brought it to them and gave it to them. Look, verse 14, but the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart. Why? Look at this. The end of Deuteronomy 30:14. It's in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. And again, that's the point Paul's making in Romans 10 in terms of justification by faith for people today. That it's not impossible. And this is specifically Deuteronomy 30 in regard to the law of commandments contained in ordinances. And then Moses goes on to say, see, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil, in that I command you to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, statutes, and his judgments, that you may live and multiply. It's not impossible to please God. He's laid it out for us. He laid it out for Israel. He came to them. Jesus came to us. You don't have to go anywhere miraculous. You don't have to be anything special. You don't have to be ordained. You just have to know what God says. And it can be in your mouth and in your heart. That's something to think about. we should never have this imagination of, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. You know, we understand nobody's good enough to deserve what God has done for us. Nobody claims that. Nobody claims to earn it. But you can do what God says. Maybe David later felt bad because he knew better. Perhaps that's part of his anger, and you might even say frustration. And poor Uzzah was the one who suffered. Yeah, Uzzah did suffer. He touched it. He shouldn't have. But there's a lot more to it than just him touching it. The more we study God's word, Connie says, the more we will know what God wants, and our reflex will be the correct one. That's a good point. I can respond to God properly because he's revealed it to me. Is 2 Samuel 6:6-8 what you were looking for? When they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God to hold it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error. Well, no. There's another passage that talks about David's error and his mishandling of the ark. I don't have it written down here, so. But this is, and notice what the text says here. Verse 7. We're talking about Uzzah's just, natural reflex. The anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error. He shouldn't have touched it. They had already started to forget what God had said, yeah. And we kind of see that in the book of Deuteronomy being foretold anyway. Okay, guys, if somebody can find that passage, I tell you what, I'll find it. When I get off here, I'll find it, and I'll share it in the comment section, because now it's bothering me. All right, I appreciate y'all being here today. It's Wednesday. This will be the last stream of this week. Appreciate y'all being here. If you're out somewhere where there are no Wednesday night services, we'll be here tonight at 7 p.m. Central, and we'll be starting in Psalm 51 in our Bible study at Mammoth Spring. Guys, I hope you have a good day. Appreciate you being here. Have a good rest of your week, and hope to see you back here Monday morning at 11 o'clock.